Okay, so tonight we're holding in the 6th lecture of the series about business ethics. We have one more to go. And tonight it's about the criminal mind. Have you ever met a criminal? Maybe you've met people who you thought were nice and honest, but in reality, they're criminals. And you will be surprised that not all criminals say that they are a criminal. Not everybody advertises that he's a criminal. And many people, even though they think of themselves as being good people, righteous individuals, nonetheless, they may be guilty of petty crime. In other words, there are big criminals and there are little criminals. But we're not going to talk about all the different kinds of criminals necessarily. We want to figure out what's really going on in their mind. Why a criminal commits a crime. What is behind the committing of a crime or transgressing, going against the law, whether it's the Torah law or whether it's a government law. What is making the individual fall for it? Why isn't there more self-control? What is motivating him to do that which is wrong? And you'll be surprised, there are many theories as to what motivates the criminal. What gets them going? Why can't they stop? When you study about this topic, you will probably come across the term psychopath and sociopath. Even though these two terms are somewhat related and very similar, there tends to be a small difference between the two. Let's just say that the psychopath can be more violent, more extreme than the sociopath. These two individuals, what they have in common is that they display antisocial behavior. Their attitude, the way they interact with people is very, very different than the norm, very different than what is acceptable. There's something about them that stands out. And if you pay close attention, you can identify it. What is noticeable, what is obvious to those who pay attention, is number one, a lack of concern for others. When I say noticeable, obviously we're talking about you're getting to know him, you've been around him, you've seen him in action. And the experts who have studied these kinds of individuals have come to the conclusion that this stands out. You will notice it after a while, a total lack of concern for others, a disregard for laws and social mores. They don't care. No feelings of remorse or guilt. And this is very important, as I will explain later on when we talk about how to help these people. Remorse and guilt is so important in overcoming many of these weaknesses that they have. But in speaking about remorse and guilt, we also have to keep in mind that you can't just jump to that level unless you've gone through the very first steps. There are earlier steps that one needs to embark on to climb the ladder before he even begins to feel remorse or pain about something he did. But nonetheless, it's very important. So these individuals do not display any remorse or guilt. They have a lack of ability to love. It becomes very difficult to them. You explain to them the importance of that, it just doesn't get through. There's an extreme egocentricity in them, which we've spoken a little bit about already in the past, how people think of themselves. But this is noticeable here. In their words and in their actions, you can see it. It's not that they're hiding it. Remember we spoke about the hypocrite? There are individuals who know very well how to conceal certain character flaws because they want to deceive you. They want you to think that they're nice, that you can trust them. With this individual, he's pretty much advertising what he is. I mean, it does come out in the open. And you can see it, that he's egocentric. And some of them have a very violent behavior, which is also obvious. At some point you see how violent they are. These individuals rarely learn from experience. They've made mistakes. They don't learn from their mistakes. And really, to make it simpler, instead of getting into all the details of their character or of their personality, if you want to simplify it, it's really all about selfishness. That's what it really comes down to. Except for that they're all demonstrating different styles. So you have different styles of expression of selfishness. It's important, however, to be able to identify every one of these characteristics, every one of these behavior patterns. But still, the bottom line will be, it's all about themselves. It's all about selfishness. Now, even though I've told you about the symptoms that can be seen openly, there are some that are not so open. Now this is a little dangerous. Symptoms that you cannot see, that are hidden, can be somewhat risky. What if you're dating someone? And you don't know. Perhaps they have a criminal mind. Perhaps they're a psychopath. Remember, they do, from time to time, behave. They do seem to sometimes come across as intelligent and cooperative, perhaps. Nice. But all of a sudden, you see the other side of them. All of a sudden, you see really the true side of them. So there are warning signs. And when I studied this topic, when I went through all the material, or a lot of the material that's available on this subject, I did find that those who have dealt with such individuals put together a list of warning signs. And these warning signs can be very helpful for those who are unsure about a certain individual, whether they're dating, whether they're working for them, or if they're already married to them. If they have this problem, well, what is the problem that they have? So there are certain warning signs, and I'll share a few of them with you. If you notice excessive anger. Now, what's excessive anger? People, get angry from time to time, they're upset. Here we're talking about excessive anger where the individual boils over, even for small problems, the slightest thing. He makes a big fuss, a big fuss. So excessive anger about something small, something so insignificant, that's a warning sign. Physical tantrums. You thought only children have tantrums? Well, some adults are really children in the way they behave. Physical tantrums. You know what tantrums are, right? No? Where an individual has all kinds of wild reactions to a situation that he's very unhappy about, but he reacts in a very wild manner. That's a tantrum. He throws a tantrum. He throws a fit, as they say in English. And it's done in a very wild way, in an uncontrollable way. He's lost control of himself. Then, obviously, if you see this, you wonder, wait a minute, what is he doing? What happened already? Why is he getting so upset? To lose control? It's not a good sign. Then there may be another indicator, and that is you hear him from time to time, quite frequently, making nasty, degrading remarks about others. Oh, he's like that, and she's like that. Nasty, degrading remarks about others, also a warning sign. And here's one that I think we may not even realize that it's bad, because it doesn't appear to be, but it is also a warning sign. He makes you feel bad for not doing what he wanted, what he asked of you. He makes you feel bad that you didn't do it. You may not come across it too often unless you work with someone like that. But this is also a warning. He's making you feel bad. That's suspicious. That's a warning sign. He puts his wants before the needs of others. We've spoken a little bit about that too. How these people care more about themselves, therefore, they will insist on having it their way. They will insist on their project being done. Their project being done before the projects of others. And then you also have a bullying behavior. You have individuals who are bullies. You know what a bully is? A bully? Again, not just children. You have adults who are bullies. They intimidate. They threaten. They usually don't necessarily carry out with action, but with words. They threaten and they intimidate. They're bullying. They're called bullies. Yeah, that's also a very big warning sign. Who's he threatening? Why does he have a need to threaten? Again, it's a warning sign. There's something wrong there. Most normal people don't have to do that. You don't have to come onto that. You're upset. There's something that is very urgent that you want to be done. It has to be done right now. There are ways to communicate that. You don't have to intimidate or threaten people. Somebody that does that on a regular basis especially, it tells you something. It's a warning sign. Another one is extreme mood swings. Now, certain individuals have mood swings. That's just normal. But these are extreme. From happiness, all of a sudden, he's deeply wounded. He's hurt. What do you mean? You were just happy. Everything was so good just a few moments ago.
Bipolar?
And we're not talking about somebody bipolar here. Because we're not really talking about a medical situation. We're not talking about somebody who's psychotic either. Here we're talking about a symptom that is very extreme, and it has more to do with his personality. And you're seeing several of them, not just one. It's not that you're only seeing the mood swings, where you can suspect, well, perhaps, it's a medical issue. No, this is something more about his personality. Or another example where you see him brooding. You know what brooding is? He's thinking of taking revenge. He's so upset, thinking quietly to himself, angry, perhaps even depressed a little bit. That's called brooding and thinking in a very, very sad or melancholic mood that he's in. How is he going to get back? After all, he has to win. So an individual who has to win may be very upset that he didn't win. So he may be brooding about it and thinking, what is he going to do next? Come on, let go, forget. Or as you say, girnade, right? In Farsi. All right, I just gave you just a few examples. The big question is, you'd be surprised, what are the experts thinking about these days? One of the things that they're very much curious about, could this be genetic? And is it treatable, of course, we want to know, and if it is, how? As far as genetics, some claim that it's completely genetic. Judaism does not agree with that. But it will say that it can be partially genetic. So we're going to talk about this because this is a very important concept. What can be transmitted through the genes? Could parents really give over certain flaws of character through the genes? I mean, is that possible? You want to be careful, however, with this, because even though I'm going to point out what is genetic, do not forget for a moment that we all have free will nonetheless. No one is born a criminal. You don't just fall into it. We have choices. We always have choices. No one is being forced, compelled to commit a crime. Don't ever think like that. Because if you do, then like many have said, you're going to basically excuse a lot of the criminals. They were born like that. It's not their fault. Always remember the man is responsible for his actions. He's accountable for what he did. He has made a choice. How he came about that choice, obviously there are many factors that will contribute towards that, but it's still going to be his choice. Man chooses to be selfish. He doesn't have to be selfish. He can learn to be unselfish. But, yes, Judaism teaches that there's a certain predisposition that the human being is born with. And what is that predisposition? What exactly happens at the time of birth? Well, depending on who the parents are, but not so much who they are, but how they were when they were together. I'm talking about the conjugal relationship, the intimacy between them. A child is about to be formed, conceived. And what's going to enter this physical body that is being formed in the mother's womb? A soul. So the Kabbalah teaches that you have here two important factors that are directly related to the eventual personality of this individual. Not to his decision making, that is free will. He has free will to decide what he wants to make of himself. But the vessel, the physical body which he receives from his parents, the soul that enters that physical body, to a great extent is determined by how holy or unholy the parents are. The soul can arrive in a more refined state, or it can arrive in a very unrefined state. And we don't really have the time right now to go in too deeply into this topic of what it means, refined or unrefined. Let us just say that if the soul is in an unrefined state, the challenges of this soul are greater than the one who's a refined soul. That's all we need to know for this lecture. That some arrive in a very unrefined state, and it has to do with the parents, how they behave towards each other. Imagine a husband with his wife, and the husband is very upset at the wife, or the wife is very upset at them, or they're both thinking of getting divorced and they're intimate. At the time they're thinking already of divorce. The rabbis list 9 types of characteristics, and not very healthy characteristics, as a result of the husband and wife not having a very good relationship between them, having impure thoughts, doing all kinds of terrible things, and nonetheless being intimate, of course, at that time. The intimacy is a very holy moment. When the two are coming together, the father and the mother, the husband and the wife, to bring about a new soul into this world. This is not to be taken lightly. This is not just about biology. This is about which soul will enter this body and what kind of a physical body will this be. And it's no longer what kind of genetic illnesses, perhaps, God forbid, there will be in this child. That's a different topic. That's medical. Genes, yes. Here we're talking about the soul. Is it going to be a refined or unrefined soul? And that will depend on the parents, their behavior, and what kind of a body they build or they prepare. This is the vessel for the soul. Will it be a body that is very physical, or is it a more refined, more spiritual body, a cleaner body that does not care so much about all that is material, all that is physical? That has a lot to do with what they thought, with how they behaved. All of this has a tremendous influence over the child that is about to be born. Still, regardless of what happened, don't forget, the child, the boy, the girl will always have free will. But it's a shame if that child has to struggle a lot more to overcome some of those characteristic flaws that he or she was born with, that they have a predisposition for. So we have one factor or one influence that is determining the type of soul or the type of body that this boy or girl will have. The other factor that will determine is the mazal. The mazal that one is born, the astrological sign that one is born, also determines the direction that the soul will take, the strength or the weaknesses that it will have. And all of that, of course, has to do with what we call tikkun. Ultimately, the soul has a mission in this world. It may have had a previous life. It has come back down to rectify something. And it is given certain challenges. So it's not that this poor child does not deserve this kind of a life. Ultimately, we're talking about a rectification. We're talking about a mission. And that's the challenge that this child will have. Everyone has some sort of challenge. It's just that so much depends on the parents too. The parents can, to a certain extent, determine what that challenge will be, to a certain extent, when it comes to character and personality. There's other challenges in life that they don't determine, that the mazal that the child was put into is determined by God. Then there is the influence or the genetics that comes from the mother's side. The rabbis tell us that rov banim domim lacheahem. Rov banim domim lacheahem. Most children inherit many of the traits from the mother's side. Okay? And I'm going to come back to it a little bit later. Therefore, if you marry a woman who has all kinds of criminal brothers, they just happen to be unrefined individuals, some of those genes may carry over to the children, because many of those genes from the mother's side are carried over to her children. Okay, so what we have here is various factors or possibilities that contribute to the formation of this individual's personality and character. All right. In the Torah, we find that there's all sorts of people who are perhaps even born to good parents. Okay? Nonetheless, they turn out not so good. We're going to be talking about this one individual who started off good and eventually became not good in the last lecture of the series, when we talk about the fall from grace, how the mighty, how the best can fall and have fallen. Now we're just going to focus on the more typical, those who almost from the start were not so good, and they can be in the best of families. Who are they? Well, you have the famous Ben Sorer Umore, or as it's called in English, a wayward and rebellious son. Wayward and rebellious? Yeah, this one is not only rebellious in society, antisocial, to his own parents. He steals from them. He hurts them. Wayward and rebellious. All right, what else do we have? One who's an unfaithful individual. We have evildoers. We have the wicked. These are all the types that you will find. If you read through the Torah, whether it's Tehillim, Psalms, or in the Chumash, you will find all kinds of names. Rasha, Oseh Avel, Oseh Aven, Belial, right? All kinds of individuals who are sinners, but they're given different names because different personality. There's one, however, that is very, very unique. And the first time you read about it, you say to yourself, what's this? Anybody want to guess? One individual that stands out, that is so unique, that he has a special name that you will not see anywhere else. He's a shoresh porer rosh vela'ana. Does that ring a bell? In English, it is a root that produces hemlock and wormwood. Now, even if you know English very good, I don't think you will know what hemlock and wormwood is. I don't expect you to know. There are certain poisonous plants, certain herbs that are very bitter. Just like there are weeds that are destructive, right? These are plants that can cause harm, sometimes even to animals. So hemlock is poisonous. I think they say Socrates was given hemlock to drink. And others also. For them to commit suicide, they used the hemlock. So these two are harmful. They're bad. Wormwood is even bitter. And what kind of an individual is this? This is the individual that the Torah describes that may one day get up and rebel against the establishment. He may go against his beliefs. He may go against his people. He may betray them. A traitor. He may be the exact opposite of what his brothers and sisters are. Good, nice, devoted individuals. This one stands out in a very, very negative way, in a bitter way, poisonous way. And he's a danger to society. This individual causes a lot of harm to his people. And you wonder, where did he come out from? How did he grow up to be this? All we will say for now is remember, parents can have something to do with it. We're not blaming them necessarily. They can be very, very special people. Look at David HaMelech, David the king. Do you know that Avshalom was more or less a ben sorer more? In a way, he was also a very, very rebellious child. I'm sure he had good qualities too. David was his father. But how could it be that from David, such a child will come out? Pretty much attempted to kill his own dad. And we hear about these things in the news these days. Children that want to kill their own parents? Hashem Yishmor. Where does this come from? Well, what about Esav? We spoke about him, I think, last week. Yitzchak and Rivka, Isaac and Rebekah, very righteous people, very good people, kind people. That their first son should be Esav. Do you know what Esav is? He was wicked, even though he honored his parents. He was wicked, as wicked as you can be. How come he came out from them? So I have a whole lecture about Esav and Yaakov, the battle between Esav and Yaakov, that's what it's called, that explains these two forces out there, what each one represents, and why they were part of this family of Abraham and Yitzchak. But this is another example of how you can have good parents having this kind of a child. And if you just want to understand this simplistically, who was, I should say, Rivka's brother? Lavan. And he wasn't such a righteous individual. He was the biggest crook in the neighborhood. Lavan? So Rivka is the sister of Lavan. Lavan is the brother. And what did we say before? Certain things come over from the genes in the family. So even so, in the case of David, in the case of Rivka, there are other elements that the parents may not have complete control over. Avshalom's mother, I mean, not necessarily the best. Even though the father is David, a lot will therefore depend on who the parents are, how they related to each other, especially during the time that the child was conceived. The time of conception is so important. It's important, therefore, that it be holy, that it be pure, because that is a very important factor that will contribute to the molding of the personality of the child. So even though we have noticed that there are certain predispositions and the child appears to be going in a certain direction, it can still be stopped. We've explained so far how some of this happens, but we also emphasize how there's free will. But in order for that child to exercise proper free will to make the right choices, he has to have some direction, some guidance. Some of these children or some of these adults are so off that they almost cannot be helped. What is the chance, or what is the better chance of being able to help an individual who's a psychopath? If you catch the problem early on. Can you identify it early on? Yes, you can. Right? Shlomo HaMelech tells us that in Mishlei, in Proverbs. You can see even from when a child is young, you can see his attitude. You can see what he likes. You can see what he's attracted to. There's a lot of things that you can see in a child from early on. If you see something that is disturbing, latch onto it. Do something about it. What happens, or what makes treatment so much more difficult, is when you let it go for a while. When something is a problem and you let it go for a while, the rabbis tell us what happens is that this individual will become shavui bidei yitzro. He will become a prisoner of his evil inclination. You know what it means to be in prison? How are you going to get out? You can, but you have to dig a tunnel. You really have to be very, very creative. You have to be very, very strong and courageous. You have to have a plan, or you have to have outside help. You have to beg for help. You have to pray. It's so much more difficult. It's still possible, but it's difficult. If we don't treat the problem early on, the chances are that this individual will be a prisoner of his evil inclination, which is why the rabbis tell us, be careful with the sin. Don't let it multiply. You made a mistake, let that be the last mistake. Don't repeat it. Why? Because avera goreret avera. Once a sin is committed, there is already a momentum. The momentum means that the next time around it will be easier. You cheated once, you'll be tempted to cheat a second time, a third time. It'll become easier and easier. And eventually it will be very difficult to stop. Let me give you a small example of how what may appear to be minor is so significant nevertheless. We spoke about selfishness. And we just said that if you catch it early on, you can train a child to be giving, to be unselfish, to be caring about others. Now, for those of you who speak Farsi, you know what chune zadan is. Or as it's called in English, to haggle. In Spanish, we call it regatear. Regatear in Spanish means that you basically try to lower the price immediately. He says, this is $100. No, I can only give you 50. Actually, I should say 25. Because eventually it will come back. Is this okay to do? If you ask somebody from Iran, he says, what do you mean? All of our life is about that. That's how you do business. You immediately do that. You immediately haggle. You immediately bring down the price. Why? Because the guy's making a lot of money. Maybe the guy is overcharging you. So you immediately put it down. Is that the reason? Or perhaps it's because you want to get a good deal. No? What do you say? What's the reason for doing that? You're just used to it. You didn't think about it. I rarely do something like this. Not because I don't want to have a good deal, My philosophy is the guy has to earn a living. He has to earn a living too. He has rent to pay. He has other costs. I mean, if I think it's overpriced, I'll tell him, listen, I think it's overpriced. I can get it somewhere for less. Perhaps you can do better. But to actually argue and try to bring it down, let the guy make a living. Why not? What's wrong with him making a living? You only have to get the better deal. Let me tell you a story that happened with an individual that sells fabric downtown. He says, Rabbi, I have a problem. I have all these buyers coming to me, and they ask me how much I paid for it. And they want me to swear that I paid for it so much. He says, it's very difficult for me in business to tell the buyer how much I paid. He's going to try to haggle with me and try to bring down the price. He doesn't want me to make barely the little bit that I'm making. What should I tell him? I told him, just tell him your rabbi says that you cannot swear. And that's the truth. You don't just swear. But I'm telling you this story because I was amazed on how people are prepared to do this, to make the guy, to get the seller to tell them what he paid. What do they care? It bothers them if he makes too much money. What do you say about this attitude? I think it's all about selfishness. Yes?
I think there are certain situations, Rabbi, where it's conducive to haggling. Nobody would go into a supermarket or a department store and haggle. The price is set.
Right.
But if it's downtown Los Angeles or it's something that's conducive to haggling, sometimes they price it high or price it low because they expect the other person to.
Right, they expect, that's what I said, yeah. Sometimes the price is higher than what it should be, and maybe it's so because they're expecting, or because they're trying to make more money on it, right? I just don't think that this habit of doing business this way is so good. This is my price. If you want it, if you want to pay it, fine. This whole game, it's a game of haggling is a little strange to me. I mean, I'm used to it. I see it all the time in Latin America. Yeah. Sure, in Iran, it's not just common, everything is like that. So, like you said, they're expecting you to haggle. But, when we're talking about being generous and being unselfish and being sensitive, I find this a little bit of a contradiction. Like, these people care more about themselves, or whether it's the buyer or seller. Come on, get it over with. Do you really want something, and it seems reasonable? That's it, But people like to have a good deal. People like to come out ahead. They won. They got it for what they were thinking of paying. Well, what if it comes out defective? So did you really win? Anyway, I just wanted to use these few examples just to show you how people are thinking of themselves. They're not always thinking about the other individual. Rabbis therefore tell us that if one succumbed, made a mistake, did the wrong thing, and he feels bad, at least he feels bad about it, he shouldn't feel so bad about what he did wrong as much as he should feel bad about the fact that there's an opening. Now the door is open for him to continue to do what he just did. It's one thing to feel bad about what you did, and that's called remorse. That's really good. But there's something worse. The fact that you did it once, that you succumbed once, that you let yourself commit this crime or commit this sin is worse because now the door is wide open. Now it's going to become easier to do it all over again, to continue to do it. What's going to stop you? As I said earlier, there's a momentum built in here that's going to make it difficult to stop. For that, you have to feel bad. So what's the cure for that? Well, during the days we had a Bet HaMikdash, a temple, one would bring a korban, a sacrifice. What was the purpose of the sacrifice? To put a stop to this. When a person brought a sacrifice to the temple, it wasn't just a penalty that he was paying in buying an animal. He was confessing He felt bad about what he did. He asked forgiveness to God. This act, even though it's symbolic in nature, was very powerful. That it disconnected him from the sin. It disconnected him from being a prisoner in the hand of the evil inclination. So if you do something wrong once, there's always a danger that it can continue and repeat itself. We want to put a stop to it. So we began to say that with these symptoms, criminal symptoms that become noticeable early on, they need to be caught. They need to be dealt with early on. We don't want them to continue. We don't want them to build up, to develop, to become later much more difficult to cure. After a while, it becomes very difficult to convince these people. What are you going to say to them? Now, I'm going to share with you what can be done nonetheless. I don't believe that anybody's a lost case. It simply becomes more difficult, just like a marriage that went sour after many years of each one doing the wrong things. Can they be brought back together? Yes, but it's very difficult. The love is gone. The feelings are not there anymore. Can you restore it? Yes, but it's difficult. So now that you want to build your relationship with God, you have to sever the relationship with the evil inclination, who has taken you prisoner. And it's going to make it difficult for you to have a potentially better relationship, what you could really have with God. So therefore, we put a stop to it. In those days, it was done with a sacrifice. An individual who continues to do it for a long time and does not stop, what will happen is that there will be no deterrent. Deterrent means that there has to be something that will hold him back. Well, he doesn't feel bad. He's not discouraged. On the contrary, he's motivated for whatever reason to continue because he's selfish. What will stop him at that stage? Only if it becomes too costly. When it becomes too costly to commit a crime, then perhaps then, the individual will stop and think about it. Maybe. But if not, he's just going to continue on. And when you speak to him and try to convince him about changing his ways, about being a better person, part of society, he may listen to you, give you the appearance that he's listening to you, but the words are not going anywhere. And it's very possible that he's not afraid. Very possible that this individual is completely not afraid of anything. So what's going to stop it? So what is the cure? What can we do to help a criminal? We began to say that this is in the mind. We agreed that partially it could be genetic. There's a predisposition. Still, he has a choice. So can we get him to do the right thing? Can we get him to change his choices? And the answer is yes. I believe the answer lies in the first verse of Tehillim, Perek Lamed Vav, chapter 36. So if you ever have a chance, look at the first verse of chapter 36 in Psalms. It reads pretty much as follows: Ne'um Pesha Larasha. Skipping a couple words. En Pachad Elokim Leneged Einav. Sin says to the wicked, there is no fear of God before his eyes. So the sin is telling the wicked, you have nothing to fear. There is no God. You're not accountable. En din ven dayan, there is no judge. There is no judge. There's nothing for you to be afraid of. The sin is telling the wicked. What is David HaMelech telling us here? That the psychology, the mentality of the sinner is that he thinks he can get away with it. Because there is no God. To him, at that moment, at the very least at that moment that he's committing a sin, God is not there. There is no God. Well, what if there would be? What if he did believe that there is a God? Then we would be able to help him with the following. The rabbis tell us in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of Our Father, one very important exercise is Heve Mechashev, Hefsed Mitzvah. Heve Mechashev Sachar Avera. Always calculate, always figure out, think, what am I about to gain? What am I about to lose? Most people don't do this. Most people, before they act, don't think. They don't calculate okay. Maybe perhaps if they're buying some mutual funds and some stocks, yes, what are the statistics saying? How did the stock perform in the last 10 years? So after the stockbroker shows you the statistics of the past, he tells you, but let me warn you, past performance is no guarantee for future results. Right? He doesn't want to, promise or assure you that what you see, the nice graphs, will repeat itself. Otherwise, he's deceiving here. He's misleading. So, same thing over here. With an individual who has no fear of God, it is so much more difficult. How are we going to talk to him? What are we going to say that's going to stop him? But if he is fearful of God, if he does believe in God, we can bring him to the point of evaluate your actions. Look at yourself. Look at what you have done. Look at where you are in life. Look at what you've missed out. We can talk sense to him. Evaluate. What are you going to gain and what are you going to lose? Because he believes in God. If somebody believes in God, there's a chance. Fear of God. Otherwise, how are you going to get to him? He's not remorseful. He'll just continue to be what he was all the time. Rabbis continue on to tell us, okay, if somebody does fear God, then why does he commit a sin? So the rabbis tell us, "En adam choteh elam kenichnas bo ruach shtut." At the moment an individual sins, it's only because a spirit of folly entered his mind. At that moment, he was not thinking. Otherwise, how could he go against the will of God? He believes in God. But at that moment, a spirit of folly. What's a spirit of folly? Ruach shtut. He actually thought he can get away with it. Maybe God is not seeing. He's not looking at this moment. Ruach shtut means a spirit of folly, craziness. He thought of something that is not really logical, does not make sense, but he fell for it. And he really fell for it. He made a big mistake. It is possible for someone, therefore, who's God-fearing to make a mistake because momentarily he was, what they say in the jargon of the court, he was insane. Temporary insanity. Not that he's insane, but he lost himself. He lost control. He didn't think. He didn't evaluate. He rushed into it. In Arabic, there is a saying, and I think in Farsi also there's something similar. Il-ajala min ash-shaitan. Impulsiveness comes from the Satan. If you're impulsive and you don't think about things, you don't evaluate, you'll make mistakes. So a spirit of folly is, for a moment, a person really thought that he can get away with it, that he can really be okay, nothing will happen to him. Afterwards, he regrets it. But what if the individual does not have any fear of God? Then it's so much more difficult. So what we've come down to is to what Avraham Avinu said to Avimelech, and what others have said as well in similar situations. Why did you lie? Even though he didn't lie about his wife being his sister, because she was a relative of his. Why did he have to come out to that excuse? Remember what he said? I was concerned, I'm coming to a place where there's no fear of God. They may take away my wife. They may kill me. There's no fear of God. Anything can happen. So I had good reason to conceal this, to come up with some other explanation as to who this woman is, other than to say that she's my wife. You see how Yirat Elokim can make a world of a difference. The Torah tells us various times in certain situations concerning business ethics, V'yareta melokecha. Be fearful of God. Why does it have to tell us that? We know that already from elsewhere, that we have to fear God, that we have to be respectful of God, that we have to follow His statutes. Why add the words V'yareta melokecha ani Hashem? So the rabbis tell us there are situations of dvarim hamesurim lalev. There are situations in the area of business ethics that are concealed, that no one knows about them except for ourselves, that we have to be extra fearful of God. I'm selling you the car as is, and you know that it's kaput. You know. So why don't you tell him? You're obviously selfish. You want the money, and you don't care about the other guy. V'yareta melokecha, Hashem says, but I know what's in your heart. Because you might tell him, well, I didn't know. Can he prove it that you did know? No. These are dvarim ha-mesurim, things that are concealed in the heart, where the other individual may never find out the truth. There's an extra emphasis of fear of God, because God knows. All kinds of situations. You know, you tell an individual, the check is in the mail, and it's a lie. He might think so. Maybe you didn't put it yet in the mail, but you eventually... All of that is a form of deceit. I mean, it's not correct to mislead people. There are situations where people are not fair to others. I may have told you this story, which is unfortunately, I wish it didn't come to my attention, but it did, where an individual went to ask another expert in real estate who he thought was fair, honest, and a friend of his. What do you think about this building for sale? And he says, this building is not for you. It's not good. It's not worth it. You're only going to lose money on it. And after he told him that, that individual who gave him the advice went ahead and bought it for himself. I'm sure he came up with all kinds of excuses. I forget what those excuses were. Oh, I still think it was not for you, but for me it's okay. But
And he's a religious guy.
the point is, wait a minute, is it really the way you said it was, that you didn't think it was for him? V'yareta melokecha, be very, very careful.
But what about the rabbi lie? You see the check in the mail, and he never mailed that. Rabbi.
Of course, there's all kinds of situations where people lie, people deceive. And that is why in the area of business ethics, there are certain things that are concealed, that we cannot prove. What did you mean? What was your intention? You know, there are people that will claim after the job is done, remodeling, I'm sorry, I'm not paying you the last installment because I'm not happy with the work you did. It's not professional, it's not good. And in reality, it's perfect, it's fine. It's just an excuse not to pay. You know people like that? Oh yeah, there are people like that, selfish, not sensitive about the other individual who worked so hard. It all comes down to selfishness. So we're talking about the criminal mind. You may think I'm talking about the biggest criminals. No, there's all kinds of criminals, especially in the area of business ethics, and especially in certain areas where we don't know for sure what his intention was. It's concealed. You can't prove it. V'yareta melokecha, in those areas, be very, very careful. Be fearful of God. Because maybe, with the fear of God, maybe that will stop you. Because even if it didn't stop you, at least you'll be remorseful. You'll ask for forgiveness. Without fear of God, how is somebody ever going to be remorseful? Why? Why be remorseful? So it takes the fear of God, perhaps, to bring about the remorse. Just to finish up, don't think I'm just making this up. It's a fact that every human being can be a criminal. Every human being has that potential at all times. Why? Because I have some news to tell you. Within every human being, there's a little thief. There's a little ganav. And that thief is the evil inclination. Why do I call him a thief? Because he's after us to rob us of our time. Time is money. With time, we can accomplish a lot. We can do a lot of good things. He wants to rob us of our time. He wants to distract us. Forget about our mission in life. He wants us to emphasize that which is physical and material in order to build up that selfishness and to cool us off from that which is spiritual. If he wins, God forbid, or if he has the upper hand, then he will disconnect us from our connection with God. He will make us forget that special relationship that we have with him. It will therefore be more difficult for an individual who is a slave or a prisoner in the hands of this thief, of this evil inclination, to do the right things in life. And even if he did something wrong occasionally, he will have a hard time to regret it, to be remorseful. He will have a hard time saying, "I'm sorry, honey," to his own wife. I'm not only talking about issues or problems in society. Even at home, it's the same problem. Here it's a crime against humanity. Here it's a crime against your spouse. Here it's a crime against God. I mean, there are all kinds of crimes. It's the thief within us that sometimes, unfortunately, gains the upper hand if we let him. We shouldn't let him. We should put a stop to it. And in order to put a stop to it, we have to strengthen that connection with God. That's the only way. There's no other way that you can put a stop to what he's doing. Those who have a more refined character, those that are just nicer and have a very healthy upbringing and a good education, and they've acquired the right values from their parents and their surroundings and their environment, then obviously are safer. Those who are living in this generation, the 21st century, with all the materialism, with all the internet, with all the pornography and the crime on TV and everywhere, I feel bad for them, for kids who are being born today and growing up in this world. Look at all the challenges that they have to deal with. I still hope there's some angels around, even in this kind of a generation. But the rabbis tell us, no, it will not be so easy to grow up in this kind of a world. The era of Mashiach, right before Mashiach comes, when things are going to really, really be very, very loose. And many people are going to succumb, many people are going to fail, marriages are going to fail, and there will be a lack of truth. And this lack of truth has to do with the most serious symptom of all, and that is the lack of fear for God. So I think this begins to explain just a little bit, why people continue to commit all kinds of dishonest acts. Even if they are religious, just because they are religious, it does not mean that their fear of God is strong. This is a continuous challenge that everybody has, no matter how good they are, is to not succumb to that thief inside of them, that evil inclination, but to continuously remember that there's someone upstairs who's looking, who's documenting everything that we do. And if we want to do the right thing, we should evaluate our actions before we do them, so we don't forget ourselves. Well, wait a minute, he's aware. He may not be aware, but he is aware. And obviously he wants us to do the right thing. So this perhaps is the only cure, if somehow you're able to get through an individual and train him to be a more God-fearing person and convince him that God exists, that there is a purpose for all this life, that life has meaning and purpose. If somehow you can get him to think this way, then you can change his whole personality. It is possible. If there's a will, there's a way. And as parents and as friends, all we can do is, when we see somebody like that, is to pray for them and to ask Hashem to please help them out, because they're really lost. They really have no control. They're prisoners of the evil inclination. But even if someone is a prisoner, one can come out of the prison if he really turns to God sincerely and asks him, please help me. And that is the purpose of Rosh Hashanah. Next week, as well as Yom Kippur, the New Year for the Jewish people, the Day of Atonement, is to take a moment and to stop and evaluate our life, what we have done right, what we have done wrong, how another year has gone by, and perhaps we did not live up to our commitments that we took upon ourselves last year. What needs to be changed? This is a time to stop before we are able to begin the new year. And, if necessary, to ask God for forgiveness. And He's a forgiving God. He wants us to start a new chapter in our life without any baggage holding us back from last year. That's a great advantage that the human being has, is to be able to start anew, to start from scratch, and not to sink in sadness and depression about the past. The past is gone. As we say in Arabic, il-lifat mat. That which is gone is dead. Don't worry about the past. Begin anew. It takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of strength, and along with prayer, B'ezrat Hashem, it will happen, B'ezrat Hashem. So I want to wish all of you Tiva v'chatima tova, Shana tova. May we all be inscribed in the book of the living.
Amen.